Right, I'm just going to get on with it then. Phil Murphy, Outside Looking In podcast. Thank you for coming on. Was it Twitter that I saw you on? Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Or
Yes.
You messaged me on Twitter. I think we'd added you on the Twitter account, and then you messaged saying that you'd seen the Bob Mills podcast. And the thing that you did is I said something on that podcast that seems to have struck a chord with a few people, not just yourself, including my auntie, actually. And what I said there or thereabouts was that for me, people are homeless if they haven't got a home. And, I consider myself homeless from 15, just before I was 16, until, my early 20s, 22. But I probably only slept rough for about a year of that. Throughout that whole period, but I was definitely homeless. Do you know what I mean? And it's a massive part of my life. But there is this idea that unless you're sleeping on the streets, you're homeless. And I mean, you're also a prime example of that. It can, people don't believe you when you say that it can happen to anyone.
Yeah.
It really can. So, just to get into it, you're ex-army, ex-firefighter. Is that right?
Yeah.
Businessman, and then. Yeah, you said yourself that you ended up sofa surfing, and in the message you sent me, I was just reading it there. You said it made you reflect on a time that you didn't have no home. I think that's what happened with my auntie. It made her really all of a sudden realize that actually there was a period in life she was staying with different family members while she was between homes, and it went on for maybe a bit longer than what she wanted to. And now that she looks back, she realizes that she was homeless and, had those sort of vulnerabilities emotionally that comes with that because you're relying on everybody else. So,
yeah, I mean, I've thought about it. It was about a year after I got out of the fire brigade. I spent my redundancy money on a business, and that went pear-shaped in 2008. And they recalled the loan. I'd secured my house, blah blah blah. And before I knew it, I was at a former girlfriend's house, sleeping on her couch, and I've reflected in the past with people, and I've often made a point of calling it technically homeless.
Yeah, like sort of not quite, but it is. Do you know what I mean? But I know what you mean. I was technically homeless, whereas when I put it out there, that's homeless.
Of course it is. Of course it is. When I've spoken to people, it's like I've not really delved into the insecurity that goes with being in that position.
Yeah.
But particularly when you mention it, and I reflected back. And I can remember quite well, really, the feeling or the thought that I was just one tiny step away from going down that spiral into, using anything, doing anything and getting by in any way. That kind of fully detached world, if you like. I was just kind of clinging on.
Yeah, I mean, there's always that thing that, I don't remember the first time it happened to me, but I do, it's there. I remember that, it would be, can I stay at your site? And all of a sudden, I'd realized that I had nowhere to stay. Do you know what I mean? Like the people that are just, it wasn't various reasons, but there would be some times where I would ask people if I could stay there, and people couldn't put me up. And all of a sudden, that was it, So what you were saying, that sort of fragility to, technically homeless, even though it's homeless, to all of a sudden I've got to sleep outside. I've got to go and find somewhere outside to sleep. And it's a very, very fine line, which is why for me, sofa surfing is homeless.
Yeah, of course it is. I mean, there was a few times when she asked me not to be there. It was her home. It was perfectly reasonable. Yeah. But I remember frantically ringing around friends and just thinking, God, I hope somebody can take me. For this night or for the 2 nights or whatever it was. But it was daunting because I do think, you spoke about the kind of substance misuse that develops almost as it's almost like a coping mechanism, really. And I could totally myself. Yeah.
So I mean, I always say to people when people are like, they're probably on drugs. I always say the same thing: go do it and stay sober. I don't know anybody. I think I've heard of 1 or 2 people doing it where they don't drink, but usually you talk to them and they're not very well mentally. So, sort of, it takes its toll. And I guarantee if I ended up homeless again for a prolonged amount of time, there's no way that I could do it sober because,
no, I don't think
like you said, it's a coping mechanism. You see these people on the streets, of course you're going to get drunk. Of course you're going to take drugs.
Yeah.
You know, and also you're vulnerable to people selling you drugs and trying to get you on drugs, and just you're vulnerable to all sorts. But I just got some stats as well. I don't mind if you, I hope you don't mind if I go over them. And because I was just reading up there, they did a sort of a survey. One of the people that I was reading, 2,000 people, out of them, 32% of them said that they've been sofa surfing at some point.
Wow.
You know, so 32% is a lot.
Weird.
Yeah, there's 300,000 people in the UK that are in hostels, temporary shelters. Again, I class that as homeless. I set up a soup kitchen in Yeovil a few years ago, and I remember the local council, which I won't get into that, but I remember we spoke to the local council and they were saying, well, we're just worried that people are going to come down and eat your food that aren't actually homeless, like the people from the hostel just up the road. And I remember saying to them, like, you mean the homeless hostel? And they said, yeah. And I was like, well, they're homeless then, aren't they? Do you know what I mean? And, you know, the idea that people would come to a soup kitchen that didn't need to. Like, you're going to finish a 9 till 5 and think, oh, you know, I'm going to go to the soup kitchen and mug them right off. Like, it's
funny, isn't it? It's funny the kind of some of the weird assumptions that people have, or where their mind goes when they see provision like that. They go straight to, oh, you know, here's a reason not to do it, or here's something to be wary of, and like you're going to be had over in some way, shape, or form, giving this food to people that are hungry.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, we made a point of saying some of them came down that we knew did have places to live, but they were lonely. Do you know what I mean? And you know, dark nights. A couple of older guys would come down because it was dark nights, and it was a chance for them to talk to people. But the other 120 families a day lose their homes in the UK, which obviously that leaves them sofa surfing. They don't really know how many people are sofa surfing because it's, you know, the invisible homeless, which you were part of, because it's such a hard thing to get a grip on. Because I mean, how do you know? But I'm not surprised that out of 2,000 people, 32% have said at some point they were sort of bouncing about.
What do you think it will have been 20 years ago?
I don't know. It's a weird one because I was homeless 20 years ago. So that's when, for me, my life was at its worst. But I haven't been homeless for a long time, especially with the Navy. I joined the Navy at 12 years ago now. You know yourself, because you were in the Army. You're in a bubble. You're sort of taken away from the real world kind of thing. So I'm told that it's a lot worse. But where I've been down in Cornwall, you know, and tucked away, I don't really see that much of it anymore. But from what I'm told, it's a lot worse, and just in general, cuts to everything. Do you know what I mean?
It's the security of tenure as well. I mean, you know, social housing tenants. When I after a year or so, I was offered a housing association flat.
Yeah,
which was I'll never forget that feeling, mate. Honestly, it felt like somebody had given me Buckingham Palace. Yeah, it really did. And I got a secure tenancy. They don't give them out anymore.
No. You know, saying my friend Earl that I did the first podcast with, you know, he was in a flat that wasn't off. It was a private rented flat kind of thing. And, you know, I think when COVID kicked in, he was in a real panic about, oh my God, like, you know, I can't pay my rent. I'm going to have to just move it because, you know, he can just be thrown out. So, yeah, I know, I think what annoyed me is during COVID, they managed to get all the people off the street suddenly.
Yeah.
And then when COVID was over, threw them back out. And it's like,
well, and they stopped evicting people. They introduced measures to stop people getting so easily evicted.
And it's like, you've just proven that it can be done.
Yeah. Well, they do it winter time, don't they? You know, the winter shelters have just opened. It's like, right, everybody off the streets. And then as soon as it gets a tiny little bit above zero, you know.
Straight back out. Yeah. Where are you, in Manchester?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's it like? What's it like there then for?
Well, I mean,
because is it yeah, so I remember who's the Vincent Company, was it, did a big thing?
Vincent Company, he's the guy's a star, you know. Max Rashford from the United.
I love Rashford, yeah.
But you know, when I think back, we were talking about 20, 30, 40 years ago, mate, I tell you what, it was nothing like it is now.
No.
It's very, very prevalent. And I see it, you know, in I think most major cities that you go to now. You come out of the station and flipping it, you can't work 100 yards without a dozen people approaching you, asking you if you can spare some change or whatever. I don't know what the numbers are like. I know that Andy Burnham, our new Metro Mayor, he's pushing some scheme, but it's a very persistent problem. At the end of the day, the only thing that's going to house it or end it is housing that's affordable to the people that need it, isn't it?
I think that's the problem as well. I always see we're going to build affordable housing, but even when they're talking about building affordable housing, it's affordable housing to buy. Yeah. And I'm like, well, what about all the people that aren't going to buy their house? And I know that you then get people straight away, well, they should be able to get decent jobs. And well, that's not the way that the world works. Not everybody gets a decent job. Not everybody's got, I can't buy a house. I'm about to leave the forces. I'm going social housing. And it's beautiful because I'm top of the list because of the fact that I've done 12 years, I'm being moved to the top of the list. It's not really a stress, but the option to buy isn't there for me. Don't really want to buy, to be honest. I mean,
truly affordable housing is what the people that struggle to pay the rent can afford, isn't it? It's not what the average sort of household earnings are or anything like that. For some people that will always be out of their reach. It's about truly affordable rents.
I think people seem to forget as well that it was only a few generations ago that one person went to work, the other person stayed at home, and on an average wage they would pay their rent, no problem, all their bills, and still have money left to go to the pub most evenings. Do you know what I mean? And it's over the last few generations, the cost of living's just got so silly that my cousin at one point he probably couldn't afford it. I mean, he could afford it, but he was living beyond his means a little bit. But he was in a 2-bedroom flat and he was paying £1,000 a month rent. And I was like, that's a 2-bedroom flat for £1,000 a month. It's just,
that's a lot of the city centres now. They're seeing a flat building boom, and I think they're like 2 or 3 people in most of them. Because that's all they can afford. The option to buy now, the shared ownership option, it's a bit of a swizz, that really, because that is the shared ownership is actually a secure tenancy,
right?
What renting used to be. You get a right to live there securely, but you take on all the liability for anything that goes wrong. With all the problems we've seen with building safety at the moment, thousands of people are finding themselves with bills for tens of thousands of pounds, even though they only own 10% of the property.
Right.
And a housing association owns 90% of it. They're liable for every penny of the defects.
Right.
And that's the same with the freehold system and the leasehold system. When you buy a lease to live in a building, you don't own the building.
No.
You just have to pay for it. But most people don't realise that they're never going to own that building. That belongs to a freeholder. But they're wrapped up in legal protections that protect them from any unexpected surprises. And leaseholders are copying for the bills. And we're talking life-changing sums of money. In some cases, it's more than the flat's worth.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a complex problem. The housing is such a complex problem. That what is the solution? Do we have to build? Do we build old school council estates? Do you know what I mean? Like we used to back in the day, kind of thing. Which I grew up on one. I know they get bad rep, but as a kid growing up on a council estate, you usually have a lot of fun.
Well, I mean, houses are houses, aren't they? The standards that they need to reach, but such are the financial mechanisms, really, which are set by politics to discourage organisations from building truly affordable social rent homes. Some councils are now doing a little bit, but honestly, it's going to take years.
Yeah, and I'm sort of big on this because I've mentioned before, I'm not really political. I say I'm not political. It's not that I don't pay attention to politics. It's just that there's nobody out there that I vote for. I don't consider myself left wing. I don't consider myself right wing. I get people telling me, you can't ever vote for I don't vote anyway. That's a whole nother subject. I have in the past, but I don't bother anymore. But you get people saying, like you've got to vote for Labour because Labour will make sure that they're solving all of the homeless problems. And I'm always like, well, I was homeless under a Labour government. Do you know what I mean? All of my homelessness was under a Labour government. Well, the Tories won't do this, the lady, and I just think nobody has built houses. Do you know what I mean? Regardless of who's in charge, they all say the same thing, and nothing ever gets done. And I think what you're saying there is it's culminating now. The problem is getting worse and worse and worse. Down here in Cornwall, we've got the problems of second homes. So now your average working class person down here is just being completely priced out of affordable housing in the areas where they grew up because there's empty houses sitting there. Do you know what I mean? They're empty for 3/4 of the year, and in the summer people go and rent them out. But yeah, it's just I do wonder, where will it end? Will it end with middle class people all of a sudden being thrown out of their houses and all Is it just votes? Will it just end when the people that do vote, which tends to be the middle classes and above, when it affects them, and until then the rest of us have just got to...
I don't want to get too political, mate, but I think we need systemic change. We've got a very binary choice, and over a long period of time they've both been found wanting.
I
want a system that puts a bit more pressure on people to negotiate solutions to things and bring the real issues to the fore, instead of somehow being able... I mean, it's housing. It's housing. How have we gone through decades with it being neglected at the highest political level like this? That's catastrophic, and it puts me off voting for either of those two parts. What I want to see is a system change that makes them more responsive to what society needs, instead of to what gets them elected.
And then they don't do what gets them elected. They don't do things that are going to get them elected anyway. They come in and just say, "Oh, we've changed our mind. We're not going to do that now." Yeah, I mean, it is. Housing is, and homelessness is the one thing that really stresses me out, makes me angry in life.
I mean, the solutions as well. I mean, I don't think there's any one fixed one, really. There's a couple of hostels not far from where I am.
Hostels,
which are really good for taking people that are sleeping on the streets. I mean, quite modern ones, quite structured. But I do think that there's another issue really that needs resolving, and that's the kind of wraparound care that people need when they're transitioning between lifestyles.
Yeah, so I did a podcast with, she used to actually be the manageress of a hostel where I stayed, and I think I brought this up saying that especially most homeless people are young people, and most of them have come from terrible backgrounds. Most of them have come from the care system, and this isn't me just saying it, statistically most of them have come from the care system. Most of them have been abused in some way or form growing up, and it's a continuous cycle. And then I think the trouble is once you get to that stage where you're homeless and you need help with housing, you also need a whole heap of other help as well, because for me, I was homeless for a long time because of the cycle of homelessness. I couldn't get out of it because I would get given I remember there was one place in Newcastle in particular, I remember, where I got given a flat, and it's like, right, okay, he's not homeless anymore. But I was just in this empty tower block on my own in an empty, I had an empty flat with, it had a cooker so I could eat, but nothing in there. It was a mattress on the floor and a light bulb, and just, I hadn't been taught how to live. Do you know what I mean? I hadn't, because of my background, I hadn't been taught how to look after myself at all. I'd been feral pretty much from an early age.
And did that happen repeatedly? Did you find yourself sort of falling?
It took me time and time again. I'm sort of big on, people say everyone deserves a second chance. It took me more than 2 or 3 chances. Do you know what I mean?
But it's that kind of like that indifference toward what made you homeless in the first place. It's like, oh, just give them a flat. So, is I don't know, are they entirely driven by statistics? Was that their job from there? And that's that stats sorted.
And also, it's something I'm thinking of doing when I'm out the Navy and I can't get in trouble for it. I'm thinking of strapping a GoPro on and actually showing what it's like to go and try and convince people that you're homeless. Well, not convince people, to get a local authority to accept you as homeless without trying to make you give them an address. You need a care of address, you need this, you need that, because it's been going on since I was a kid. It's just cooking books. It's fraud is the way I describe it. It is literally local authorities refusing to accept that they've got homeless people so that they can keep their stats down and pretend that there isn't a problem. When we did that charity in Yeovil, we went out and did a rough sleep count one night, and we counted 8 people, and then the local authority had tried to tell us there was only 2 people, and then we said, well, we've counted 8. And then the next week, they tried to tell us that there was only 2 people until they found out that we were in the area. And that's why there was now 8, because people had come because they thought we was going to help them. And we was like, well, we counted them before you even knew that we was in the area. So you're lying. Do you know what I mean? And it's just, local authorities, there's probably reasons. Yeah, sorry.
There's a story about Manchester where they were queried, but how come you've only got this low number of people on your list when all of these people are obviously homeless? And apparently they didn't count them if they were stood up.
Do you know? Yeah. It's just, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, that's probably, it wouldn't surprise me though, because I've seen it. I've experienced it. I've experienced being forced to find a care of address so that I'm not a statistic. Do you know what I mean?
With a mate of mine called Katie Safe, who used to lead the outreach team in Manchester. I'll put you in touch with her.
Yeah, please do.
She's a fascinating woman to talk to. We had like a dream that we're trying to get off the ground, where a little self-regenerating community where you get some like design for some modular homes. There's an open source design now for a really easy to build house, and we were going to get a few builders in to train people coming out of prison, or who were transitioning from homelessness, and then build them a hut in this little village that had solar power, and then they would learn how to build houses for people and teach other people.
Yeah. Do you know what? Funny enough, I've got a friend of mine. She's probably the most educated friend I've got, actually, but she's eventually just decided to sort of sack mainstream society. She lives on a commune. The Pilsden community, they're quite well known. Pilsden community, it's a Christian commune, but they live in a commune. And I was joking with her, saying, "Look, I'm coming down to check that you're not in some cult." Like, do you know what I mean? You know, I went down and I went in really dubious. And when I left, I remember thinking, "This is how people are supposed to live. Like, this is how people used to live." You know, sort of throughout the ages in small communities, all looking after each other, doing different jobs. Do you know what I mean? There was one guy there, he was an old man. All he did was the fire. That was his one role there. He would keep the fire going. Do you know what I mean? He'd get the firewood. But they
all liked the look of that job, didn't you?
Yeah. No, but I just thought to myself, yeah, I mean, there are solutions out there. I think when you say systemic change, I think that we need to look at completely different solutions than we've looked at before.
Well, that whole village thing, it did scale up, you know. Like, I remember while I was at school, all of the kind of me mates' older brothers and stuff, they all walked into jobs. It was like, you know, Uncle so-and-so had a vacancy at his place, or the next door neighbours got him on an apprenticeship or whatever, you know. But it changed so much in the 80s when I left in 1982. You know, I was given £10 a week to do a job that some council worker used to do the week before and had been laid off. You know, £10 a week we got, and it was just it was a kind. I think that's one of the reasons I joined the army. Really, was the hopelessness of it all.
Yeah. How old were you when you joined the army?
16.
Oh, right. And did you do a full career?
No, did I? No, I did 5 years.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. And then firefighting. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was twiddling my thumbs a bit. You know, I did 5 years in the forces, and I was sort of, that was quite, you know, it was really enjoyable at times at that age. You know, I could run all day and night. I was fit as a fiddle. I'd taken up radio operating, so it was really engaging. I enjoyed the learning stuff. But then, you know, I think I realised fairly quickly, really, when I started to grow up, that it wasn't life for me.
No.
You know, I was a bit of a pacifist on the side. One of my mates got killed in an accident. I thought that was all a bit fudged and covered. So I got out, but after a few years, I was bored, mate. I was really bored. And I happened to sit down at a wedding beside a guy that was a firefighter.
Right.
And I just thought, why didn't that occur to me?
Yeah. I'm a trained firefighter for the Royal Navy. And a few of the lads leave and go into the fire service, airports and stuff like that.
Right.
A couple of, I think, well, it's mad that you didn't think of it, because a lot of lads leave one uniform service to go into another. I've got a couple of friends that broke my heart and become police officers. But I've got, you know, one's become a prison officer. I've got him coming on, actually.
Yeah, one of my mates did that. Yeah,
I'm like,
the discharge and everything, it was crap, mate.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't get any courses or anything like that. We got like a chat off somebody, and you know, I left thinking I was a radio operator, thinking they told me I'd walk into a job at BT.
Yeah, it just didn't happen.
You know, they weren't interested that I could do more at 30 words.
It's better now. I leave in April after 12. It'd be closer to 13 years when I leave, and I've got a full resettlement package. I'm getting retrained in heat pump installation. You know, there's loads of courses that you can do. So
let me ask you something about something you said a minute ago, when you said it was like the third or fourth place where you finally were able to settle. What made the difference there?
Oh, do you know what I thought? I don't know. It was just non-stop trying, and you sort of get a bit older and you get a bit better. I mean, I met someone, which probably helped, you know, the fact that I had
stability,
a wife and stuff, like, who, you know, I mean, we weren't married then, but I'd met a girl who was also, she ended up leaving home. She was from an Indian background, so she was a bit complicated. She ended up leaving home and sort of was homeless with me. But from there, slowly but surely, you get a bit better at, but I say that when I joined the Navy, we were constantly moving. We were always sort of, the threat of homelessness was always there. It would only take, I was terrible at holding down a job, and it would only take, a month where the rent slipped slightly, and that's it. It was just impossible to catch up. And eventually we just think, right, let's just move on. When I joined the Navy, me and her were in the loft room. This was at 31. We was living in the loft room of a shared house with a bunch of ex-users that had been given this house. They'd all come out of rehab. They're my friends, so it wasn't a bad thing that I was in with them. But that's where we were. We were like in a shared house. About 6 or 7 of us. That was at 31. So I wasn't settled house-wise until I joined up and I got my first marriage quarter. It's only over the last 12 years that I would say that I'm now at the stage where I'm going to confidently go back into Civvy Street, knowing how to live. Do you know what I mean? I know it sounds.
How did that feel when you got your first married quarters? What was that like?
Oh, yeah, it was lovely. It was the fact that it wasn't just a marriage quarter, it was where it was. I don't know about the army, but with the Navy, other than Portsmouth, which isn't the greatest, down here in Culdrose and at Yeovil, the two places I've spent most of my time, the marriage quarters are in the countryside. So I was suddenly taken away from all the hustle bustle and the hardship of a city, and it's been outside of work. It's been a really nice, peaceful sort of decade where I've been living in the countryside and I live in a town at the moment, but it's a town right at the bottom of Cornwall, so I'm surrounded by beaches and countryside. And when I was up at Yeovil, I was in a place called Ilchester, which is a tiny little Somerset village. Again, all green fields, really, really nice and quiet. So I think what I say is that the Navy's kind of fixed me over the last 12 years. The Navy's fixed the damage that was done because I'm from a care system, care system, expelled from school, moved around loads of violence at home when I was growing up, just chaos, then homeless, drug addict, prison, just hardship. And I don't think it's until you get out of that situation, like I have over the last 12 years, that you get to suddenly take stock and come to terms with everything. So I would say only over the last couple of years I've managed to get my head together.
I think that an important word you use there is chaos. I think that's one of the things that people fail to understand. That forms part of the failure rate when it comes to rehousing people, is the understanding.
Yeah, it's just, my life was just, until I was mid-20s, my life was just chaotic from a really early age. I was taken into care at 4 because my mum was a drug addict. From there, I was in care in the 80s with a very Asian looking face, which wasn't the greatest of experiences. I was bounced all over foster care. And then I came out to just non-stop violence. Then it was all over London to different domestic women's refuges. And this was just constant. And then moved up to South Shields overnight because that was the new women's refuge that we were staying in, and then just moving around South Shields, and then kicked out onto the streets, and that was it. It was all over the country, just bouncing about. And by the time you get given that first flat, it's no wonder that I have no clue how to pay bills, how to budget money, how to not, as soon as I get money, just spank it on drugs and alcohol and nice food. So you eat, live like a king for a day. And then live like a pauper for 2 weeks because it was back in the days of gyros and stuff like. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it was spend it while you got it sort of thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, because it's just the excitement of having money. Now I think you can't spend all your money. You got to eat for 2 weeks. Do you know what I mean? But then,
don't you think there's more bills, there's more stuff you need now? Now you need internet amongst other things. You need a mobile device amongst things. You need all this stuff, and you just expect it to come from this environment where none of it is.
Yeah.
And then just go, bing, I've sussed it. It's just not that simple, is it?
No. Yeah. I wouldn't want to be homeless now. there seems to be a real, I don't know, it's a mixture. There's there's no in between now. It's really unsympathetic or sympathetic kind of thing. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, you know.
Yeah, it totally does, and
which is why, it's why me and Earl like want to do these, because I keep stressing to people that I'm the same person as I was when I was homeless. I'm exactly the same person. I'm just not homeless anymore. So I used to look trampy, you know, and people would judge me for that. You know, people would judge me, like, look at the state of them. But I look like this because I'm homeless, mate. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, contrast it with what they do when you're in a uniform.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? And I'm the same guy. I am the same person.
Yeah.
I'm just in a different scenario. You know, if you took me then at 17 and put me into a uniform, I would have been no different. You know, I was just, so it's just to sort of try and stress to people that try not to judge. You know,
I'm lads in chaotic situations joined up.
I wish there was an option for them too. I don't think it's that easy. And I'm not talking about national. I know that everybody said bring back national service. Don't think that would work these days, but I think everyone's missing a trick. I said this the last time. You know, I couldn't join until I was 32. I've been in a lot of trouble. I get it. You know, I'd stopped getting into trouble at 21. I would understand why when I've just stopped getting into trouble, they're not just going to let me straight in. But by 25, 26, I was clearly ready to come in. I would have come in at that age and done just as well as I have, or just as bad. You know, I would have, you know, by 25, 26, I was as mature as I was at 31, and I'd stopped getting into trouble. So I do think that maybe there's an avenue to not be as sort of stringent, because they're missing a trick. I sort of said this recently, that with this whole push for inclusiveness in the armed forces, which is great, they're sort of excluding your stereotypical young working class lad that is getting up to a bit of mischief because sort of ducking and diving kind of thing. And that, for me, that's the armed forces perfect for those lads. You know, most, I say lasses as well, but you know, if I'm being honest, I only look at it from my own point of view. Mainly lads. I think that there's a lot of early 20-year-olds that have maybe been in a bit of trouble here and there that aren't bad people. They've just sort of got nothing to grip onto, that the forces should really look at taking on.
I think one of the things it does, I think one of the tools that you need to develop to have sustainable housing is the habit of work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that's one thing that the forces does really well.
Yeah. You've got to get up.
Gets you into the habit. Yeah, and I think there's room for deals to be struck there as well with people that go in the army. Whereas, you know, you could really tempt some people, I think, by saying, you know, come and do an apprenticeship in this, or come and get 3 driving licenses.
Yeah.
And stay for 3 years.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people would be tempted if it was a bit more flexible, but at the same time, knowing what you're getting back, you know, and I think that could be a great help to a great many people now, I think. Yeah,
I mean, you know, I said it on the Bob Mills podcast. You know, I'm not joking; it saved my life. Do you know what I mean? I just, because I knew that if I didn't do something, that was my life. I'd still be bouncing about. You know, I'd probably be washing dishes for a living, which is what I was doing a lot of the time. You know, or cooking in a pub, which is I'm not knocking it, but
I think I'd have ended up in some bother. I do think it was a kind of an instinctive thing to go in. You know,
I think drugs wise, I probably would have ended up in a bad place. I reckon as I got older, I might have sort of not relapsed, because I'd stopped doing sort of drugs in my early to mid 20s, just grew out of it, if you like. But I can see why. And this, I got asked about this by one of the chiefs once, because with the drugs brief, there was a point where once you're over 30, you don't need to have it as much as the younger lads. And I was explaining that a lot of my friends that I've grown up with have ended up with drug problems when we've got older, because of the monotony of life.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And because of maybe the fact that they don't feel like they've achieved what they wanted to achieve, and it's easier to just take something, you know, here and there. And I've got a few friends that have got like amphetamine, you know, they take amphetamines every day, and it's become a habit.
Yeah.
You know, and that's
because they've got that secure base now.
Yeah.
They're not worried about being homeless. It's almost an indifferent habit, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just like, well, you know, I may as well. Do you know what I mean? Because life's very same every day. So yeah, the Navy sorted me out. If it's time to leave, it's time to leave and go do something else.
Well, I do think that kind of that confidence it gives you, and that kind of habit forming work thing are a really important part of the equation. And I just don't think that they've put it all together very well just yet. I see some signs that they're starting to, but it's such a massive problem there now. My sister's a GP down in London doing homeless outreach.
Right.
Oh, the stories, mate. You know, it's just frightening that how disconnected the system is in some places. The kind of the fight at the NHS hospital end to get people out, and yet the fight on the homeless side, because those people, although they're fit to be discharged from hospital, they're not going to get any better if they're on the streets.
No, I mean, you know, so my friend that I'm going to be doing a podcast with is a prison officer. And it's funny because obviously I had a sort of, my view of prison officers is skewed because of the fact that I was in prison when I was younger, but actually knowing that he's a nice person that's become a prison officer for whatever reason, but he's got empathy. I know he has, do you know what I mean? Because I know him personally. And, you know, he has just said that it is horrendous in there at the moment, and that he spends most days acting as a mental health expert, you know, which isn't his job, you know. And I sort of put a post up the other day, something that he'd sent me, and he was like, we've had to send this 51-year-old guy with severe mental health issues. He's been released to a taxi to Oxford to pick up a tent and a sleeping bag. That's it. Do you know what I mean? And, you know, even people, I think one or two people have got, well, if you can't do the crime, don't do the time. That's not the point. The point is that the point is, how is he not going to reoffend? And also, why is my friend who's a prison officer having to deal with such severe mental health issues? Why aren't the mental health people doing well? It's because of the cuts. You know, people who shout Tories, but this goes back to the beginning when we were saying, it's time and time again. It doesn't matter who's in charge, Labour, Tories. Dems joining with Tories, you know what I mean? It's just
yourself, aren't you? You know what I mean? You've not solved any problems there. You've just created a whole load. You know, that person will end up in the healthcare, in probably back inside again.
Yeah,
you know, every avenue from that point on.
I came across Tony Benn talking the other day, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I was listening to her. And I thought, is he right? Because he was saying the people that are at the top don't want you to vote. The people that he was, you know, basically, if you're healthy, a healthy and fit society is the type of healthy and fit society that will hold the government to account. And he was like, the government don't want you to be healthy and fit. They want people to be struggling. They want people to be downtrodden because they don't vote. And there's times where I think, is that true? Is that why? You know what I mean?
I mean, it's a good question, isn't it? I was looking at some local election results the other night, and apparently 10 to 15% turnout is dead normal.
Yeah.
I just thought, I was overcome with hopelessness.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a prime example. There was a little bit. I never voted anyway. I never voted when I was homeless. You know, I had far more important things to worry about. Do you know what I mean? And then, you know, there was a little bit where I sort of became around the Corbyn time. I think everybody, and Brexit sort of got everybody politicized a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, I went out and voted for a couple of things regarding that, and then just I thought nothing changes. Doesn't matter.
No, that's the thing.
Nothing changes. And then, you know, I've just got to the stage where I just think our political system runs itself, unless I saw a quote, was it saying that, you know, every vote counts, and I just thought the only time that your vote counts in sort of our our sort of Western society is if you're accompanying that vote with a big wad of cash to the person that you're voting for, then your vote will count. But other than that, my vote didn't count. I mean, people might tell me I'm wrong, but this is how I feel. My vote doesn't count, so I'm not going to bother voting.
But what else are you going to conclude when you've done it a couple of times and it was completely pointless?
Pointless, yeah.
You know, what's the definition? Is it doing the same thing?
We're ending on a very depressing note here. We're winding it down on a very depressing note.
I don't know, mate.
Bother.
I think we're living proof that you know, it's just a matter of waiting for the right piece of the right turning or the right option to stand in front of you, or the right person to stand in front of you sometimes.
Yeah. So I mean, I got a lot of help. What I found is that once people see that you are genuinely trying, because there were times where I clearly wasn't trying. I accepted my lot. Do you know what I mean? But I think once people see somebody struggling, but they know they're trying, do you know what I mean? It's not just feeling sorry for them. It's a case of let's help them out. That person's trying their hardest. Let's give them a hand.
One of my big concerns now is that social housing used to be like I said, secure tenancy, or that kind of thing. One of the things that concerns me about it now, and one of the reasons I think it's reducing, is because some people think they're doing those people a favour.
Yeah,
it came up at the Grenfell inquiry, when the residents were complaining about things that were happening in the flats when they were getting refurbed that were making them dangerous.
Yeah.
One of the responses was, do you realise that, you're getting all this for nothing? That was one of the workmen. It wasn't even, you're getting all this for nothing, as though it was a big, most places like Grenfell Tower, they've paid for themselves twice over.
Yeah.
They're a pure money maker.
Well, and you're not getting it for nothing because you pay rent. That's what you pay rent for.
Often it's a bigger percentage of wages than somebody that's on a mortgage.
Yeah. So what do you do? What do you do now? What is it?
Well, now kind of split my time really. I spend half my time advising landlords and building owners on high-rise residential safety.
Yeah.
And I do research in. I got involved with some research with a guy called Stu Hodkinson, who was writing a book a couple of years ago called Safe as Houses. And it was about how the political climate and the way that big housing deals and things like that are done, how that has negatively impacted the people that are in these houses. And throughout it, there's this feeling, because there's mass sums of money knocking about with huge redevelopment and regeneration projects. And it's like this prevailing sort of air amongst people that you can move a community, just push everybody out of it.
Yeah.
And then you can monetize that land. At the end of the day, they're just in social housing, and it's like the people there have got family connections. They've got friends and relatives around them, and those connections and those networks are often providing that thread that keeps you hanging on, Ricky. Do you know what I mean? It might be a single mum that needs somebody to look after the kids for a couple of hours once or twice a week so that she can go to the doctors or something like that.
Yeah.
And when the big money comes in and the local politicians decide that they're going to have this piece of land, it's almost like inconsequential. That they just don't care what happens to the people that are there. And that includes when refurbishment take place as well in large clusters or housing estates, if you like. The way that people are treated, it's what led almost directly to Grenfell Tower, at least, because everybody was just ignored because there were social housing tenants, and that meant that the people making all the mistakes were allowed to get away with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that's it's happening. It's probably happening in most cities, but I know that in Newcastle, the city centre is getting bigger, if you like. Do you know what I mean? And the money is getting the more deprived areas that were right around the city centre are now being pushed out further, because those areas are now, people are realizing it's prime location because it's right next to the city centre. So it's a faster commute kind of thing. So a lot of areas that used to be deemed as rough aren't so rough anymore. Gentrified, I think, is the term people use. They're being gentrified.
I heard the other day, I don't know how true it is, that one of the reasons that some people are pushing so hard for HS2 is because it will bring certain banks of land in the West Midlands and around Crewe and places like that to within a 1-hour train journey of London. And that means that for London speculators, that means that's then London marketable, if you like, because it's a commute away, and the value of that land, will shoot up.
Yeah, I mean that's like Slough, where I'm from. Slough is, I think I did something with a train, and now you're only like 5 minutes away from London, and all of a sudden the properties just shot up, so they were absolutely astronomical because rich people from London are going to move in. I mean, Slough's a weird place. Slough, you'll spend 300 grand to live in a ghetto. Do you know what I mean? It's such a strange place, it's really rough in places, but to buy a house in those rough places, because of where it is, will still cost you over £250,000.
Madness, isn't it?
Madness. Housing's madness. The whole thing.
I must tell you a story. I was on Facebook one night a couple of years ago, and like a local community group on Facebook, and somebody started saying, "Has anybody seen that guy in the tent in the local?"
Yes, I remember. Yeah, this is what we're talking about.
And obviously, you could discern straight away, aren't you? Anyway, 1 or 2 people made contact with him. He was just crashing in a tent in the park, just become homeless. and all of a sudden he wasn't in the park anymore. But I managed to establish connection with him through the website, and he said, I'm all right, I'm all right. I said, well, what are you doing? He said, oh, I'm working in a garage. And it was like, good. Well, where are you sleeping? And he said, in the garage. Oh, okay. So I kept in touch with him. The next day, he'd been locked in this tiny little office, and he was describing rats like dogs that were running around there. This was the next morning. And then it was Friday. That night, he was locked in again, and they locked him in without any food.
Yeah.
He was basically doing jobs around a garage, and in return for not being in a park, he was in this garage, but he was in a really dodgy situation. He had no food for the whole weekend. And me and Katie, who I spoke to you about before, we ended up going around there to climb on top of the car and push some sandwiches and food over the roller shutter so that he had something to eat for the weekend. And then as soon as the weekend, because he was really scared of these people. He was really frightened. So on the Monday, we just arranged to be there so that he could just do a runner and jump in the car. And then we took him along to the homeless team. And Katie's really good at that sort of thing because she used to work in that line of work. But it just made me think, God, that's that thing about being close to disappearing and nobody would notice, essentially.
No. Yeah, yeah. And did anything happen to those people?
Sorry?
Did anything happen to the people in the garage?
He didn't want to do anything about it.
No, too scared.
Too scared.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wouldn't.
I mean, I think
he spoke to one police officer later on, but it was like I totally understood his fear.
Yeah, I mean that's a completely modern day slavery is a big thing.
Yeah.
You hear about these things come up on the news where people are kept on farms and stuff and forced to work for a bit of food. Yeah.
Well, it's not entirely separate from one of their hooks is that they give you somewhere to sleep.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean,
that?
They all would have started off from being homeless.
Yeah.
So, yeah, depressing.
It is a bit, but
but no, look, I mean, I say it's depressing, but there's lots of people trying to make a difference. I think
that's what you can do, mate, isn't it? Are you going to set up another food bank or something then?
I probably won't do that again. I found that very stressful. I didn't like the people that I was dealing with, and I don't mean the homeless people. They were sound. Everybody else, I hate. No, I mean it was very stressful. I was out of my depth as well. Like I was a bit of a cowboy. I got it off the ground. It's a tick in the box. I get to say I started a registered charity. I do some stuff. There's a Northeast Homeless that Earl, the guy that did the first couple of podcasts with me. He's a success story, if you like. He was homeless for years and years and years. He solved the big issue for years, and then he now works for Northeast Homeless as a support worker. So I'll probably do a bit of volunteering with them. I've just sort of been made one of the project managers for Sports Trader, which is, I don't know if you know of Lance Haggith. I think he's an MBE and unsung hero sports personality. He's got this charity / business. He's a very successful businessman that I think I haven't asked him, so he might watch this and say, no, you're completely wrong, Ricky. But I think he's basically made his money kind of thing. And he was one of the founders of Microsoft. His list is ridiculous for all the stuff that he's done. And now he set up this Sports Trader, which is a charity that by all accounts it's a charity shop, but it's laid out like a proper shop. It's not like and it sells sports equipment and it sells good sports equipment. It's not all secondhand stuff. It's just cheaper, and it also ties in with setting up clubs in the local area. The people that work there are often ex-convicts, disabled people, just socially marginalized people that will come and work for him. And it's a proper job kind of thing. And he's taken me and a friend on as the project manager. He's got shops all over the country, and then I asked him whether he had one up in Newcastle yet. He'd made it up to Hull, and I was saying, have you got one in Newcastle yet? And he said, no, I just need to find the right people. And then we pitched him last night. Actually, we pitched him and said, use us. So that's what's happening now. We're just very literally 1 day old. And that's where I'm going.
That's a bit exciting, that, mate.
Yeah, I've got loads going on. So I leave the Navy in April. I leave the Navy in April to very exciting times. But I couldn't have done any of it without the sort of the the platform that I've been given over the last 12 years. So again, what we were talking about, I think the forces, the MOD, the government, whoever, I think they're missing a trick. I think there's a lot of I think there's people out there that would grab this opportunity with both hands and really, really use it. Rather than just come in, which I'm not against, because I advise that to people as well. If you're a young person and you don't really know what you're doing in life, come into the forces for 4 years, work it out, and then leave. Do you know what I mean? Once you've worked it out, it's just a way to get paid. But I think there's a lot of people out there that would come into this kind of. I came in for 4 years. I've done 12. Do you know what I mean? Once I got used to the stability, the stability.
When you've normalized chaos, you know, just being in a home is an achievement, but being able to make it sustainable, you need
like what you said, just going to work every day. That's what the Navy's taught me, that you've got to get up every single day and go to work.
And that it doesn't kill you.
And it only took the threat of arrest for AWOL to make me do that, you know. But it gets you used to it, you know, and you realize, it doesn't kill you. And actually now I couldn't imagine life where I'm not getting up, going to work.
That's it.
Be a raging alcoholic.
Well, that's the trick, isn't it? The transformation between those two states is how people will make that journey successfully.
Right, Phil, it's been very nice to talk to you.
You're a gentleman, Rick. I'm a big fan of what you're doing, mate, and all of the best of luck when you leave the Navy, mate. Thank you very much. I'll be watching you. Cheers. Subscribe, share, get people. This is where I'm supposed to tell people to subscribe as well. Bob Mills told me off that. He was like, is this where you do your bit where you tell people to subscribe? And I was like, I don't know, is it? Yeah. So if you're watching, subscribe, please. Apparently that's what we need. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.